Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Sorry, I'm walking in from the back. I see a lot of people are looking confused. Good morning. My name is Nico van Rooyen. I'm a board member at ISACA, and I'll be the host for this podium today with Ramsey at the back. You guys can see him there. So not to take too much away from the first session, we've got Arnaud here talking to us from FedEx. Published author. You're going to guys having English is hard this time in the morning. You guys are going to have a fun time with him. If there's any questions, please raise your hand. Myself and Ramsey will walk through, give you guys a mic and make sure you address it. But also feel free to wait at the end because they might address it somewhere during the session today. So without any delay, Arnaud, please, thank you very much for being here.
We've got a major problem today. And that problem is that information security is so complex that normal people, our families, our elderly, they don't really understand it. Our corporate leaders, they don't really understand what is this. This is why I've written a book about cybersecurity, and it's to demystify, to make it accessible to non-technical corporate leaders, to boards. Because these are the people that we need to convince. These are the people that we need to inform. Today I'm going to speak to you about cybersecurity considerations for AI systems. And as we develop more complex technologies, the need to secure them is even more pronounced, even more urgent. So again, we've got this major problem that we as an industry have to tackle. But before I go ahead, I want to take you back in the past. Does anyone remember this date? Do you remember where you were in 2007? Yes? Who was that? You remember where you were? Excellent. This is Chicago. This is the Magnificent Mile. Let me take you there. So imagine you're in Chicago. It's summer. It's nice and warm. You're in shorts, T-shirt, walking down the street, and you've got high-rise buildings. You've got the hustle and bustle, typical American city, and shops everywhere. This is the shopping street, the famous shopping street in Chicago. And imagine you're walking, and you see in the distance a store, and it says, "Out now." And so you see a crowd of people standing there, and you join the crowd, and you wait patiently. And there's an excitement in the air. There's anticipation. And finally, you get into the store, and you see a minimalist design, something quite unique. We don't have stores like this in the Netherlands. And you see tables with products on them, and you see people crowding around the table. So you wait your turn. Again, the excitement is palpable. And finally, you get to the front of the table, and you get your turn in front of the product. And this is what it was. The original iPhone. And I've got one here today. Ah! Does anyone remember this day when this was launched? Let me get a show of hands. Who at this time was Team Nokia? You had a Nokia phone. Team Nokia. Quite a lot of you. Quite a lot of you. That's good. Who was Team BlackBerry? Does anyone remember those? BlackBerry. Not so many. That's interesting. Who was Team No Mobile Phone? Excellent. And who's Team, no matter what I ask you, you're not going to put up your hand? Excellent. And who was Team No Phone? So who didn't have a phone? Oh, there's one or two of you. Okay, interesting. Today, who has got a smartphone on them right now? Smartphone. I'm looking for anyone who doesn't. Who's got more than one? 2 smartphones. See, now this is interesting, because if you had asked the crowd in a little bit earlier than 2007, do you want a mobile phone? Many people have said, no. Nee, nee, nee. Does everyone speak Dutch? Nederlands? Yeah? Ek spreek 'n beetje. But I saw a nice YouTube video where they were interviewing people in the street. Mevrou op haar fiets. Mevrou, wat denk je van de mobieltelefoon? Madam, what do you think of the mobile phone? And she said, no, absolutely not. I don't want people to be able to contact me, which was the sentiment at the time. They asked another guy also on a bicycle, meneer, wat denk jy? And he was like, well, if someone wants to get hold of me, they can phone my home and leave a message on my answering machine. Does everyone remember that wonderful piece of technology, the answering machine? And today, we've got people with multiple devices on them. Does anyone have 3 connected devices? 3? Okay, we've got some with 3. And does anyone have those glasses that have just come out? Meta glasses with little cameras? Not yet, huh? So that's interesting. But it was interesting at the time when you saw this thing, and I hold it up because it's actually quite small, when you went up to it and you looked at it and you started to touch it and feel it and experience it, it was kind of underwhelming. It didn't really do that much. And when you looked at this, did you realize that it was a technology revolution? Not really, because when you look at it, you think, And subsequently, we have Instagram, which basically has taken over photography. You hardly get cameras anymore. Then we had Spotify. CDs have died, more or less. I don't know, I don't have a CD player anymore. When I moved to the Netherlands in 2009, I had a collection of 1,200 CDs. I was very proud of it. I worked in a CD store as a kid, very proud. And it's one of the things I had to leave behind when I left from South Africa to come to the Netherlands. And now that I look back, I feel like, well, that's kind of antiquated. I'm glad I left it behind. I don't have any CDs. I don't even have a CD player anymore. What about Uber? In 2007, the idea of getting into a random person's car would have been unthinkable. Today, kind of normal. What about Airbnb? The thought in 2007 of staying in a stranger's home in a strange country? Unthinkable. Today, normal. And so you have it. Shazam, discovery of music, TikTok. Remember that? These are all words that we just didn't have in 2007. And Coinbase. Who's got cryptocurrency? Does anyone have Bitcoin? Yeah, we've got a few people. And this is the point a little bit with technology. When it comes out, it doesn't look like much, right? And today, we're talking about AI, and it's the buzzword. And if you listen to people who like seasons, they say we were in a AI winter, and now we're in AI spring, and possibly at the top of the hype cycle. Last week, I had the pleasure of being in Barcelona for the Gartner conference, and everything was AI. It's the only topic we spoke about. AI was everywhere. So I think we're at the hype. That's interesting. And look at this beautiful image. This is AI generated. And the interesting thing about the future, it's not a place we're going to, but one we are creating. And this is something I want to share with you today, is that when you think of the future, you're actually part of creating that future. As risk professionals, as IT governance professionals, we have a role, a fundamental role, in ensuring that the technology that gets generated, created, deployed into the world is done so in a responsible manner. And this is a serious task that we've got ahead of us. Kind of scary, right? Because everyone likes to talk about the benefits, but we don't always talk about the things that can go wrong. Now, I'm a member of the APF. This is the Association of Professional Futurists. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I encourage you to have a look at their website. And today I want to teach you how to think like a futurist. Now, a futurist, despite what the name says, it's not about predicting the future, but instead it's about looking at the possible futures, considering the possible scenarios, and then determining strategies on how to cope with them. But if you want to learn to think like a futurist, there's a couple of ways to do it. And we always look at today I'm here, and now there's a couple of paths ahead of me. And the first way to think is plausible possible. So given the trajectory we're on, given the trends we see, given the political climate, the economical climate, what's likely to happen with the technology? Next, you can think about possible. And this is where the crazy people come in. I call it the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is where you can think of all the positive scenarios, like AI will save the world and will create a utopia. And this is where the pessimists have a field day as well, where you can think about all the negative scenarios. Jobs will be lost. AI will take over the world. We'll get AGI. And basically, the world will end for humans. These are the negative folks. And then preferable. And this is what we really want. And this is what we focus on today, which is the technology's here. It's got a lot of capabilities. It's a reality. Now what we've got to figure out is how do we make sure that we can implement it in such a way that it benefits us, that we mitigate the risks as much as possible so that when we deploy the technology, it's done in a safe way. So that's just quickly a sense for how to think like a futurist. Again, I encourage you to go and have a look at the website. You too can become a member of this association. And it's a really interesting way to look at any technology. So if you think of space, if you think of the metaverse, if you think of cryptocurrency, Web3, there's ways to think about all of these technologies in such a way that you don't just become negative. Because as risk professionals, we have a tendency to always look at the negative. What can go wrong? But you can also think about what can go right and how do we make sure that when it goes right, it's implemented in a safe way. This is another image I like. And by the way, these images, I generated all of them from DALL-E 3, the latest iteration of generative AI models by OpenAI. Now, this one, out of interest, I saw a presentation last week and they had something similar, and I thought, gosh, this is a beautiful image. I need one just like it. So I took a photo with my cell phone, I put it into ChatGPT, and I said, please create me a prompt that will get me a similar image. And within seconds, it had given me a prompt which was way superior than anything I could have come up with myself. And then I put it into DALL-E 3 and said, please generate this image. And this is the image I got. And I'm so proud of it. When I saw it, I was like, wow, I don't need to do anything else. The question you need to ask yourself today, though, is, did you see AI coming? Do you see it coming? I think we're at the start of another technology revolution. And the question you've got to ask yourself is, did you see this one coming? Now, I'm going to boast a little bit because I've got a LinkedIn profile. I think many of you do. And I write quite a few articles. Obviously, I wrote a book, so I was researching, and I wrote some articles. And last year, in 2022, I wrote an article called, What is Generative AI, and Why Should You Be Using It? And I used at the time Stable Diffusion beta. It had just sort of come out to generate an image that looks like Van Gogh, Starry Night, with someone standing there on the edge. And I got the generative AI also to generate the article. Because I was trying to make a point, is that you didn't actually need to do much to get an article with a nice picture and a nice title. And that was in November, 3rd of November, 2022. And shortly thereafter, this happened. ChatGPT. This was the start. But the interesting thing is that this came out on the 30th of November. And I certainly don't want to presume or to indicate that I somehow predicted the future, but this was a lucky guess. I saw it coming, I wrote the article, and it came out later. This was the catalyst, this was the start now of the revolution, because before then, let's get a show of hands. Was anyone using any sort of AI before then? Yeah? Before, okay. And now, has everyone used ChatGPT? Let's get a show of hands. Yeah, okay, a lot of people. Has anyone not used ChatGPT or any kind of generative AI? Okay, there's no shame, huh? This is like in 2007 when you didn't have a mobile phone yet. But if this is the start of a revolution, which it is, a technology revolution, I encourage all of you to make sure that you get the chance to use these technologies, because they happen so quickly now. In the past, it took 10 years before everyone had 1 or 2 mobile phones. Now, within a couple of months, look how many people have used it. That's phenomenal, right? And in the past year, we've had Meta come out with a model. We've had Bing Chat, which is probably one of the more popular ones, also based on OpenAI. We've got Bard, Google's model. We've got Pi. Then we've got Stable Diffusion for image generation, Anthropic, Claude is French, I guess, Midjourney AI, DALL-E 3, it's the one I use. And these are words that a year ago, had you said them, people would have been like, what are you talking about? These are strange words, right? Bard But this is where we are today, and this is how quickly this has happened. And this is a technology revolution. Now, this man, Vladimir Lenin, he made an interesting quote, which is that there are decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades happen. And I would say with AI, there were decades where nothing happened, and now in the past year, there's a year where everything's happened. It is absolutely everywhere. And the interesting thing is that we don't know exactly the good or the bad, right? So the benefits, the risks, we've got some idea. But as we couldn't predict in 2007 what the mobile revolution would bring, when we stand here today, we actually can't definitely determine what's going to happen in the future. We have some ideas. This is another image I generated, also like it very much. And here's a quote: "Despite the potential dangers, it could be the greatest technology humanity has developed." That's profound. And equally, what I lose the most sleep over is the hypothetical idea that we already have done something really bad by launching ChatGPT. These two quotes are from Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI. And that's kind of scary, right? The very same guy who is leading the company, leading the charge, and has released these incredible technologies into the world, he's kind of not sure. He's kind of on the fence. And the interesting part, the release of these models, there was some thought in the industry that as we start developing AI, it'll be so powerful, and what we'll do is we'll keep it contained. We won't just put it on the open internet, but rather we'll contain it and see how it reacts. And here they just decided to put it on the internet. And their logic at the time was, well, we'll open it up, see how people use it, and then start putting what they call guardrails in place. And indeed, over time, you've seen people were asking it to create bombs, recipes for all sorts of viruses. And then over time, they started putting guardrails in place. But this is an interesting way of looking at the technology. There's good, there's bad. This is another gentleman I want to introduce you to. This is Roy Amara, American researcher, scientist, futurist, and the president of the Institute for the Future. Impressive credentials. He came out with a law, Amara's law, and that is that we tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short run and then underestimate it in the long run. And I think this is what's happening with AI now, is everyone jumped on, everyone started using ChatGPT. How many people use ChatGPT every single day? Show of hands. See, far less. And indeed, there was a hype in the beginning, everyone was using it, and then over time, it started getting less and less. So I think in the beginning, we all thought, wow, this is magic, it'll do everything for us. And over time, I think we've realized, well, maybe not so much. But indeed, over the next 10 years, what AI will do for us as a society is profound. And no one here can guess what it's going to be. We're going to have to wait and see. But let's talk about the benefits. So I'm an optimist, and I love to talk about the benefits. This is another picture generated by DALL-E. And for those who have a good eye, and I love how diverse it is, and I love how it shows us the future, but I don't love how this chair only has 3 legs. That's kind of troubling. I also don't love how, like, he doesn't really have an arm. So if you look at the detail, you might go like, yeah, it's impressive when you start, but when you look into it. But nevertheless, impressive. AI, the benefits, it's going to automate tasks and processes. Now, we already have robotic process automation, so you might say, well, it's not that different, it's just an extension. I would agree in some ways, but on the other hand, you see now agents coming in, AI-driven agents. So we expect automation to increase. Better customer service and user experience. I hope so, because when I phone a customer service line, it's not always that good, so I hope it does improve. We've got more reliable forecasting and prediction, so weather prediction, stock market predictions, disease progression, these kind of things. We've got accurate medical diagnoses and treatments. There's a lot of promise around medication and personalized medication, which I think is really promising. Advancing the fields of medicine, cybersecurity, autonomous vehicles. Does anyone have an autonomous vehicle? Self-driving car? Anyone? Tesla? Does anyone have a Tesla? Okay, there are a few. You don't drive it automatically yet, I guess. So that's coming. And then cybersecurity, which is the field we're all interested in as well, is there's definitely a lot of promise with AI systems. Smarter, faster, decision-based and data analysis, improved education, learning outcomes. So these tools are very powerful for unique learning experiences tailored to you as an individual. So the Khan Academy, as an example, has done a lot in the AI space to make the learning unique to each individual, which I think is so powerful. Because when I was at school a long time ago, you attended the class, You attended the coursework, and whether you got lost or not, irrelevant. Yeah? Now it's personalized. You didn't get this particular concept. We'll spend a bit of time and help you through it. So that's really interesting. And on the dark side, the devil, the risks. This is a risk event, so I guess we're all risk practitioners interested in risk. 10 years ago, I think I was at this event, this conference, this venue. I loved it. I was very impressed. And we were talking about the cloud. The cloud was everywhere. That's all we spoke about that year, the cloud. And it is interesting to think, okay, 10 years later, we don't talk about the cloud anymore. Why? It's because everyone's using it. It's just there. I expect AI will be something similar in due course. But the risks, and there are a lot of them. Data poisoning. So with databases, we always had this concept of garbage in, garbage out. With AI systems, it's the same. These models have been trained on the whole of the internet. And I don't know if you spent any time on the internet, but it's not always good. There's a lot of negative things on the internet. And so when you feed your AI models with the internet, all of humanity's thoughts, you often get racism, bigotry, all sorts of things. And so you've got to be careful when you ingest into a model. The data that you're putting in needs to be correct data, needs to be reliable data. But of course, cyber criminals have also figured out that they can poison the data. So that's called data poisoning. Model theft also. So companies are spending millions of dollars, lots of compute time to generate these models that can do fantastic things. And cyber criminals just then steal those models. So what's the problem with a stolen model, you'd ask, because a lot of these things are open source, are freely available. But the reality is that the ones we get have the guardrails in place. If a model gets stolen, then you no longer have the guardrails. So then cyber criminals can remove the guardrails and start using it to generate phishing campaigns, these kind of things. But more than that, there's a company today where you can feed it all of your videos, your voice, some of your articles that you've written, and it can generate a model of you. And if that gets stolen, well, I would have a problem with that, right? So now identity theft takes on a whole new dimension. Deep fakes as well, we've already seen those. There was one last year with Mark Rutte, which was really fantastic. If you haven't seen it, I'd recommend you YouTube it. And last week, politicians in the UK have been complaining because there's been a smear campaign using their voices where they're saying all sorts of abusive things to their staff, and that's being used to discredit the politicians. Now, there's elections in the US next year, very prominent, and I think deep fakes are going to cause a lot of havoc. So I think we're watching this in real time. There's no solution yet, I don't think, and we're going to see how this affects now elections, significant elections. AI-powered phishing and malware, I think we've already started to see those. In the past, you could always detect phishing. Somehow, the spelling was a bit off, the grammar was a bit off. And I was never sure if they were looking for the really stupid people in society, so therefore spell it wrong, and if a person still clicks, then you know you've got one of those people, or whether the people generating genuinely couldn't spell in English, and this was why you had some weird spelling. But now with AI, they can generate incredible, targeted, and at mass phishing campaigns, targeted to you, to your likes, to your interests. So that's kind of scary. In this world, and in my book, I recommended that when we look at information online, you've got to recognize that it's not all true, right? But how do you know if it's true or not? And my ultimate conclusion is you don't. And so even if you read it and you think, okay, I think this is true, still question it, right? And that's the difficulty we've got today, is we've got this abundance of information, yet this kind of eroding trust. The trust is getting less and less. And that's as a consequence of AI. Copyright infringement. So when I generate this image, I have no idea where it comes from, whose original images are being used to train this model. Now, interestingly, OpenAI, in their conference a week or two ago, have basically guaranteed that anyone using the model to generate anything, if they have any copyright lawsuits filed against them, that the company will pay for the damages. So that's really interesting. So that's already a development that's happened just recently. So that's really good. So it is a risk, but already the industry is responding to that. Privacy violations. So if you ask, and maybe each one of you should do it, is ask ChatGPT, who are you, and put in your name and see what it comes up with. It's not very different from what Google had, but now it is interesting if people start to look you up using these generative AI models, what are they going to find? Yeah? And indeed, if we fed the internet into these models, it will have a lot of information on individuals. Job losses. So this is the scary one, and people who write articles online, they're trying to get you to click, so the more outrageous the article, the better. And the ones that scare you with job losses, your jobs are going to go away, these get the most clicks, right? So this is why people love this topic, that AI is going to remove all jobs. I'm kind of on the fence on this one because I think technology always brings other jobs with it. So if you think 10, 15 years ago, a social media influencer was not a job, right? So I kind of think that technology, yes, will reduce some jobs, will make some jobs redundant. And normally these are jobs that humans don't like to do anyway. But I think the reality is it will also create many more jobs. So I'm an optimist. I look at the abundance side of things. But these kind of articles are getting a lot of clicks and a lot of people are worried about job losses. Interestingly, the one article I read had 10 jobs which were immune, can you imagine, from AI job loss. And one of them, you'll be lucky to hear, is cybersecurity. So if you work in cybersecurity, as I do, you, according to the article, are safe from AI disrupting your job. So congratulations. That's the good news. That's what I wanted to tell you today. You will all have jobs. And I'm glad about that because I think the jobs that we do, the jobs you do, are critical, absolutely critical. There's a reason there's a seatbelt on a car. It's because someone in our positions back then said, hey, this is important. We should do this. So, lots of risk. Hallucinations, if you use these models, you'll find that they sometimes hallucinate. I think the word hallucination was probably not one we used very often, and now we use it a lot. AI hallucination. Makes you sound like you know what you're talking about. And if you ask a generative AI model to create something, it will give you an answer whether it knows it or not. So that's quite unique. Humans, if they don't know, will say, well, not so sure. The AI models will give you the answer as if they know. But that's what we're dealing with today. We've got AI, we've got this amazing technology. It is a revolution. And we've got the good side, the bad side. And that's what we've got to contend ourselves with, educate ourselves about, and learn to navigate. Now, I wanted to introduce you also to the Collingridge dilemma. It's the first time I've said it right without stumbling, because it's kind of a mouthful. And this is the double-blind problem. And actually, this book, The Social Control of Technology, came out in 1980. So it's already more than 40 years old. And already then, David Collingridge had identified that in the beginning with technology, there's the information problem. Is that we've got this technology, but it's not so easy to determine what the impacts of the technology will be. So we put it out into the world, see how people use it. The best example today is social media. When social media came out, when Facebook first came out, it was wonderful. It asked you, what's your favorite movie? And I put it in. What's your favorite book? And I put it in. And I think many people did the same thing, because we didn't know, right? It's this new technology. It's going to connect us to our friends, lost friends. And so we put stuff in. And then over time, and this is the problem then, is the power problem, is later, once the technology is out, it's then very difficult to contain it again. So then the impacts start to become more visible. So with social media, you had depression, you had addictive behavior. You have all these unintended consequences that, well, we didn't really anticipate. And this is called the Collingridge dilemma. So when you look at any technology, you've got the same thing unfolding. And this is exactly what's happening with AI now. We've released it into the world. It's wonderful. It can do so much. Yet we don't know what the ultimate consequences will be. And if you follow some of the AI specialists and they're talking about AGI, artificial general intelligence, the singularity they sometimes call it, this is where AI becomes so capable, it's able to do everything that a human can do, including self-iterate and self-improve. And at that point, the logic goes that it will improve so much that it will eclipse us as humans. So that's a scary day. If that happens, I think it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. But indeed, it's true with all technologies that we don't know what the impacts, the ultimate impacts will be. I love this photo. This is the original airplane. None of us were around back then, but this is great. And this photo, by the way, has been, if you're a photography expert, you'll think, hey, this is far too crisp and clear and realistic for 1903. You'd be correct. So this has been enhanced by AI, which is why it looks so good. And what I want to point you to is there's two people in that photo, and the one is lying, you can't believe, lying in the middle on the wing, right? And that's the younger brother. So he's 32, the older brother, the older right brother, he's 36. I think the 36-year-old is the smarter one of the two, frankly. But this gives you an idea of how technology, when we bring it out, it could even look quite ridiculous how we use it. Huh? How crazy. So he's lying on it and flying this thing. Now, they flew it 4 times, and on the 4th attempt, they broke the record. 260 meters was the flying record in 1903, right? That's really fascinating, because if you think where we are today, just over 100 years later, now airplanes are so capable, there's those horrible seatbelts. Anyway, we figured out how to use this technology. Interestingly also with this is after the 4th attempt, there was a lot of wind and the thing flew over and broke. So they had to then come up with their second iterations. And this actually lives in the Smithsonian Museum, Space Museum in Washington, D.C. So if you ever have a chance to go out there, well worth seeing. But this is really fun. When you look at this, you think this is how humans develop new technologies. This is how humans put new technologies into the world. And here's another example. This is slightly earlier, 1886. And this is one of the first cars. And look how wonderful it is. 3 wheels, right? So what could possibly go wrong with 3 wheels? But I also like where the people are sitting, like right in front. Again, what could possibly go wrong? You crash this thing and yeah. And later on, we decide that we need crumple zone. We need airbags. We need seat belts. So all the controls come a little bit later. But it is interesting to look, because when you then look at this and you think of the technologies that we're releasing today, so AI, robotics, blockchain, cryptocurrency, I think we're releasing them sort of like this. And over time, over the next 5 years, 10 years, we will start to see guardrails put in place, and the technology then gets better and easier to use and more safe for society. Now, controls. Let's talk about controls. Because, of course, I've spoken about the pros, the cons, what can go wrong, a couple of dilemmas, a couple of laws, blah, blah, blah. And now, we're interested in, okay, so how do we do this? How do we actually secure AI systems, right? The good news is, and this is, I think, always fun for us as industry professionals, is we don't have to remember all of this in our heads. We don't have to make up our own frameworks. No, the frameworks exist. We've got ISO 27001, we've got COBIT, we've got various. NIST has a framework on information security. And luckily, the frameworks for AI systems are based on these, which makes logical sense, right? Because all of these technologies ultimately have a back-end which looks the same as existing systems. You've got your operating system, so you've got your physical environment, you've got your operating system, and then you get the database and the application layer. So AI systems are somewhat similar in that way, but also unique. So all new technologies have this unique component. So if you think about space tech as an example, it's based on everything I've just said, but the unique component is that you're going to send physical items into space. So then things like patching becomes more interesting, right? Physical access to the device becomes more of a challenge. So there's some nuances. With AI, Microsoft have come out with an AI security risk assessment, which is really good because they're one of the industry leaders, of course. And they break it up into administrative controls and technical controls, which is kind of what you would expect, right? So you need to have the administrative layer, the policies, the procedures, the guidelines, all that good stuff. And then, of course, the technical controls. And again, you see there's some familiar friends there: data collection, processing, model training, that's kind of unique. Deployment is unique. And then you see then later on things like incident management, business continuity, disaster recovery. So a lot of the stuff that you already know comes back in AI system protection, but just with slight nuance. And that's the good news, right? Because when you're learning this stuff now, you don't have to start from scratch. So hallelujah, your certifications, your CISA certification, your CISSP, CISM, whatever you've got, still hold a lot of value, a lot of value. So I would say to everyone here, don't worry if you think, well, this is new, this is going too fast, I don't really understand it, I'm a little nervous, I'm kind of getting older now and I don't want to play with new technology. Don't worry about it, because it's just an extension of what we already know. So you are the experts, you are. You just need to learn this extra component. Now, not to be outdone by Microsoft, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the US, have also come out with their model, and that's the Artificial Intelligence Risk Management Framework. And there they've also given a sort of circular breakdown, and it looks at collection and processing of data, planning and designing, operating and monitoring, and it goes all the way around, again looking at similar things, deploying using the model, verifying and validating the model. So a lot of it is around validation of the models. And there are more of these. So a lot of companies, Google as well, have AI safety boards and groups in their organizations, and a lot of them are talking about responsible AI. So it's not something new, but it's taken kind of like 12 months or so for it to become really prominent. Another boast is, I released the book in March, and I had a section predicting what's going to happen with regulation. And I said that I expect laws focusing on transparency of algorithms, algorithm bias, more prescription on when usage is legal or not, and guidelines to address potential abuse or misuse. That was in March, and I'm very happy to say that AI regulations finally have started to become more of a topic. This is another image I generated with DALL-E 3, which I was very proud of. So recently, there's always this thing with regulation where it feels like the technology comes out and the regulators do nothing. And then we start using the technology, misusing the technology, seeing what it can do, good and bad. And then finally, the regulators catch up. And then it takes another year or two to implement the law, and then another year before it's enforced, and then another year after that before they start fining anyone, right? So it always feels like regulation somehow is behind technology. And I think as you see innovation and technology, emerging technology, coming out quicker and quicker, and iterating quicker and quicker, developing quicker and quicker, this challenge that regulators have is even more pronounced. But luckily with AI regulations, finally they've woken up. 30th of October, White House signed the executive order on AI, 110 pages, so quite comprehensive. And it has things like, if you develop a model exceeding a certain threshold, you need to tell the government about it so they can assess security risks, national security being one of the primary concerns. But there's a really good piece of, well, the executive order. It's not a regulation yet, but at least a good executive order there in the US. The UK, at the same time, more or less, held a 2-day summit on AI safety, so that's wonderful. It's about a year too late, but great. The UK government finally got on board. The G7 released the Code of Conduct, also in November, so this just happened now. It's really fresh. And then the EU AI Act, likely to be concluded in December, depends who you ask, and then the UN AI Advisory Board. So you look at the dates, it's happened literally in the last week or two, and that's really exciting. But it's taken a year. In the meantime, deepfakes have run rampant. In the meantime, fake news on the internet, phishing attacks, all sorts of things have happened with no regulation. And the big deal is that the companies that are developing this technology, the big tech companies, they're always the one who have the resources to do this kind of stuff. And then equally, and this is the negative side of the regulation, they're also the companies that can afford huge teams of people to do the work. So smaller companies potentially aren't able to participate because they just don't have the resources to do what the regulation requires. And some skeptics have been heard saying that, well, Sam Altman and the Microsofts of the world are very pro-regulation now because they want to squash the competition. So if you're a cynic, that's where you'll land. I'm a little bit more optimistic, so I think regulation is actually important because leaving companies to do their own thing is not good. And you had that company that has basically scraped the internet of all faces, and he's using the technology to sell to police departments to basically look up any face using what's on the internet. So that's kind of an unregulated use of technology. So, this is the question. Is this the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning? And again, another beautiful image by DALL-E 3. So who thinks this is the beginning of the end? We've just unleashed this monster and it's going to kill us all. It's going to end the world. Who thinks beginning of the end? One brave soul. So you're a pessimist. Get your life insurance in order. So the rest of us, who thinks this is the end of the beginning? So AI winter's over, and now we enter spring, summer, and all the rest. Okay, well, that's good. I'm an optimist as well. There are a lot of people who didn't put up their hands. So yeah, there's a lot of you who just don't want to participate, and that's fine. I am an optimist. I think the technologies that we have always have problems, always have risks, but ultimately offer so much more potential, giving access to education for everyone. I come from Africa, South Africa, and I can tell you that educational opportunities are not evenly distributed. I can tell you that medical opportunities are not evenly distributed. So AI holds a lot of promise in that regard to democratize the technology, to make it available to people all over the world, which is wonderful because when we get those 2, 3, 4 billion people that are not online, are not connected, are not participating to connect, there's a really good chance that something great comes out of it. And one of my favorite examples I heard was like Mozart, if he hadn't been born in Salzburg when he was born, would never have been the greatest composer in the world. If he had been born in Uganda, for example, we wouldn't have the wonderful symphonies that he's written, right? So that's a good way to think about it. So there might be a Mozart out there today, or an Einstein out there today, living in a third world country, and now finally they have access, just like you and I, to ChatGPT from their mobile device. They have access to tailor-made education. So it's phenomenal. I'm an optimist, clearly. A small plug, if you want to get hold of me, you can go to my website, bookonscybersecurity.com. I love this quote by Harry Truman, which not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. So if you are a leader, you are definitely a reader. I don't recommend that you buy my book, actually, because most of you already know cybersecurity. Most of you are probably already au fait with the subject. But what I do recommend is that you buy this book for someone that you need to influence in your organization, right? Your board, your CEO, someone in the organization who's got decision-making power over what the organization does, but may not appreciate the complexity of cybersecurity. And we have a job, a responsibility, to make cybersecurity as least technical, as least complicated as we can, such that the people in the decision-making positions make the right decisions about the technology. And then when you write one book, you normally then have to write a second book. So indeed, that's true with me. So a small plug for my next book. It's about emerging technology, emerging threats. So it covers all the buzzwords of the technologies that we're facing now. And it's really trying to explore with new technologies, what are the threats that we see emerging. That's coming out in March next year. I'm co-authoring it with somebody who works at ABN AMRO. Thank you very much for your time. I do want to say the job that you have, the responsibility that you have is so important. So I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate the work you do. I know how difficult it is because I do it myself. I'm in the trenches every day. But it's with so much respect that I stand up here today. I really respect everything you do. And I hope you keep fighting the good fight. We need as many people in this industry as we can because the job we have is fundamental. Thank you very much.